here with NYXL. This is Fusion Chops, episode 1. Alex meet Nick. This is Nick Larson. Pop in the screen, Nick. Nick edits video and learns guitar on the side.
Nick, how are you, man?
Good, how are you?
Doing all right.
Cool.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, just a little bit of background for everybody because this is a new thing. We've been doing the deep dive with Brett Stein, the How to Holdsworth, with all the 9-note scales, getting everybody super confused about everything, including ourselves. We don't know how to do anything now. We've basically taken ourselves apart and we don't know how to put ourselves together.
Yeah, we have to reevaluate the guitar universe again.
Yeah. I don't know what anything means. But me and Nick have been going on a kind of deep dive of your Instagram page. With your permission, we're going to include a few clips when we edit this together.
Sure.
And my God, do you have some chops?
Oh, well, thank you.
Very, very impressive. And yeah, we need to relearn how to think, because I mean, for me personally, I'm sort of I play a lot of gypsy jazz. I'm a right hand heavy kind of player. And just, seeing the thing that really draws us to you, just on one level, is just the touch. It's just very cool. Like, you see, I don't know what like, I guess we'll get into the technique in a minute, but it seems like from the outside, sort of like you can just play with your left hand and you're just using your right hand to articulate. Like somehow, like, it seems like you're sort of choosing where to pick, but things are coming out.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of questions about, things that have to do, I guess, with sound and setup initially. And then I really would like to, obviously if you're cool with it, like have it take as long as it's going to take, but
Sure.
It's super interesting, man. So first of all, props to you. I mean, really.
It's very kind of you. Thanks for listening and your interest. I'm happy to be hanging with you again, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. So this is great. So I guess off the bat, some questions. Are you pretty picky about amps, or are you treating amps more like a platform where you plug in your pedals and you can get your sound?
Pretty much the latter. I've grown very accustomed to the Fender thing, having a good Fender tube amp, whether it be a twin reverb or a deluxe, something that sets a kind of ground level for like a nice, warm, clean sound that takes pedals well, that takes whatever information I put into it well. And I think part of that isn't just because I like the sound of the amps, it's also because when going on the road, as you know, it's like its backline can be weird. It's difficult to transport amps around. I know a lot of people do the Kemper thing now, or whatever modeling device they have at their disposal. I haven't gotten into that world yet personally, even though I'm interested. And the Fender thing just seems to be a good workhorse amp, whether I'm in town or if I'm on the road and we're in X city one night and then the next night we have to go somewhere else and use another backline. It's pretty much guaranteed that wherever you are in the world, there will be a Fender twin or a deluxe, something along those lines that that we can use. So that's the kind of short story. And then in
terms of setting up like a backline amp, like you plug in, what kind of dialing in do you do, and what do you like to, what are you trying to get out of it in terms of a bass line?
It varies from amp to amp and like room to room. I usually have like settings that I'll go for, like in terms of creating a neutral tone, I guess you could say, stuff set on all knobs close to 5. And then I'll adjust from there. And then I just work with, I kind of have to deal with if I'm on the road, I'm at the mercy of whatever the backline is. So if the amp sounds different from night to night, which it does sometimes, like you can take one, you know how it is, one Fender twin to the next or deluxe to the next, and it can vary wildly. Sometimes they're brighter. I usually like a little more of a darker sound to begin with, and then I can add brightness as I need in the mix. I would say that I generally don't like brighter sounding amps.
So you will adjust from your pedals or from your guitar or from the amp?
Both. Like the amp is like more in a neutral setting, kind of like I said, and then I'll adjust from the pedals as needed. Like the main sound, usually, like if I'm playing with Protocol, for instance, I like a smoother kind of overdrive sound, like from a tube screamer. Mm-hmm. And then I have reverb and delay on my pedal board. And then if I need an extra little bit of boost gain wise, I have like a rat pedal or something like that can help put me over the edge, give that little bit of extra headroom.
It's hard to imagine listening to you that your tone for some of the blazing kind of lead playing you're doing is just a tube screamer into a Fender amp with some reverb and delay.
Yeah.
That's what it is?
For the most part. And then, like I said, if I want that little bit of extra like character of I have an old rat pedal that I use a lot of times.
So it's going guitar, tube screamer to the rat, you're feeding the tube screamer to the rat, and then in terms of like how you're setting up like your tube screamer, I'm assuming it's probably quite a bit of gain from the pedal.
Yeah, it's usually set in like the 2 to 3 o'clock range. Yeah.
And the volume is just to match gain with the amp? Like, will you ever, is that like an always on pedal for you, or just your clean tone would just be the clean amp?
The clean tone would just be the clean amp. I mean, I usually have verb and delay on there. And then I love using chorus. Like I have this old Ibanez stereo chorus. I've got a smaller rig set up at the moment, but that chorus can work great as well. Not only because I like the sound, the character, but it provides a little bit of a volume boost too. Something about the pedal.
And this is like for your cleans, not for
cleans. Yeah. And then sometimes I'll use it with the overdriven tone.
Okay, but that's more for effect, not like your basic lead would.
Right.
And how about like the tone adjustment on the pedal? Where would, like on a typical night with like a solid amp, where would it be? On the darker side?
On the tube screamer?
Yeah.
The tone is probably about 12 o'clock. It's not like super high.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not really doing a whole lot of filtering to the tones, but just basically your guitar and the amp are the main
thing. And I'll adjust as needed depending on the room or like what I'm hearing in the monitors or coming out of the amp. It's like a moment by moment thing. The tone knob, I'm adjusting that a lot of times on the guitar.
And what types of like for your main lead tone, what types of delay and what type of reverb do you gravitate towards?
The ones I have on my pedal board for the most part, or that I use for the most part, are an MXR reverb pedal. I like that one because it has there's multiple different delay sounds there. Everything from your spring reverb to the modulation reverb, which I like to use, which has that little bit of, you hear the note detune ever so slightly at the tail end of the note, and I use that sound. And then the delay is a flashback, a TC flashback. It's pretty basic.
Yeah. And how do you have it set? More like a slapback or like a medium delay?
Yeah, it's not super intense. I would say most of the knobs are set to like the 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock range, and then sometimes even lower, because the room sometimes, depending on what the size of the hall is, like I might not even have the delay on at all. Because sometimes it becomes a wash if the room is too boomy and then I don't have enough clarity in the lines. Yeah.
This is very disconcerting. He's barely doing anything, Nick. Shit, we were hoping that it's a pedal.
Or that I sold my soul to the devil a few years ago or something.
Okay, and then the rat is just basically, I'm guessing from that point, just added gain, right? It's just,
Exactly. Yeah, there's something about the rat that I know some people use it as like their main sound. To me, it's a little too grainy.
it's
Like
hairy, yeah.
it's a hairy sound. But I found this one on eBay a few years ago. It was like from the late 80s, which has that like coveted Motorola chip that everyone's after.
Yeah.
And you know, some people say they can't tell a difference, or there isn't a difference like in terms of the electronics from, like, let's say there's this JHS
Huh?
kind of rat simulator, which is really cool, and they've, I guess, replicated the circuitry. I can still hear a difference. I know I don't want to sound like a smartass, like, oh,
Yeah.
you know,
If you hear it, it's there.
this is really great, but it has like the settings to where you can go to the white face rat, you can go to the OG rat pedal. I have one of those white face ones, like I said, from '88. I can still hear a difference. There's a softness to it. There's just something about, there's a warmth to the older one that is, you know, it's just, I guess, down to the particular electronics of that pedal. But I love, you know, it's funny. I realized, like, after looking at my rig when I had it set up for touring, that my overdrive sound is basically John Scofield's setup. And I'm like, shit, I have a tube screamer, I have a rat, and a stereo chorus. That's
Yeah, it's the same thing.
something in my subconscious is like, it's John Scofield, dude, do it.
Hell yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like we got that sort of out of the way. So how do I phrase this? The fluidity, those legato lines, like, it's, for a lot of people, including myself, I feel like I have to have a lot of gain to feel like the guitar is sort of activated for legato playing. And it seems like you're doing it with not quite as much gain. So again, questions about touch, what exactly it is you're doing. I noticed that your thumb position is pretty unique and sometimes appears to be almost off the guitar on this edge, like just sort of barely hanging there. So I'm guessing I see that the right hand's pretty light. I have questions. about about the mechanics. Yeah, just mechanically, I want you to walk us through it, like your approach, like where it comes from, like how you get the fluid sound, how you work on lightening up what looks like really lightening up the right hand, and some of just I don't know where a good entry point is
Yeah.
to this world. So I'm assuming you teach quite a bit. When you teach people your technical approach, where is the beginning?
Well, I think it depends from person to person. Let me pick up a guitar here.
Sure.
And let's see, we'll make sure you can hear everything okay. All right. I'll move this so you can see me a little better.
Perfect.
Well, I would say a lot of what I talk about when people, like, for instance, are curious regarding like the legato thing is the idea of left hand finger independence. If you're,
Okay.
you're left-handed guitar player, I guess the right, and I would, and not having to rely so much on your right hand, but like you said, use it as a means of articulation. And I think the sound I'm going for oftentimes involves articulation with the right hand that's more seamless, to where you don't hear, like, it's not super obvious all the time that the pick is being used, because that affects like time feel and stuff too. Like where you're articulating how, you know, dynamically what's going on, that affects the sound. So it's really a feel thing, like a time feel thing that I'm going for. And this whole idea of finger independence with the left hand comes into play a lot.
When you say finger independence, what do you mean?
So not just like the ability of your left hand to operate as much on its own as possible without the right hand, but the individual motions of the fingers and how they can be interdependent from one another. Because I think, like, for example, when guitarists think about legato, oftentimes they're thinking about it in a guitaristic, very guitaristic way, like fluttering, and it's just like one kind of. Guthrie Govan talks about this a lot, and he brings up beautiful points, and one of them is like, it's almost as if guitar players oftentimes think of legato passages as one motion rather than individual motions put together smoothly. And that I try and avoid. There's certain legato sounds that guitar players have that are great, but it's just not my
I think I know what you got, like the kind of shrapnel, you know, these kind of like Satriani, Steve Vai kind of 3 notes per string.
Yeah, and I love some of that stuff too, but like that's not necessarily the sound I'm going for.
Sure, of course.
And so that's that. Does that make sense? Like that's where I'm coming from when I talk about like finger independence. Like
so when you're so basically when you're using legato, like when you're doing like left hand kind of motions with your index finger, will you hammer on? Will you kind of use it as a sliding bar, or like actually try to pick the note with your index, like you're playing a piano? You know, typically, like I guess in that style of playing, a lot of times when people cross strings, that the index finger sort of slides in bars.
Yeah. Like another way Govan brought it up was like guitar players oftentimes will. This is kind of this finger, the index is acting like a capo, and then everything else happens next to it, and then you reveal this note rather than this having the ability to function well on its own, right?
I think I'm having an aha moment, Nick. Aha. Okay. Yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah. Okay.
So it's like there's so many things that we could talk about that, like,
let's just do one of them first and then the other.
Okay. One thing I found has had a big effect on like the way I think about that style of playing, I guess, legato playing, is, well, one, the true meaning of like legato, like it being not only having a smoothness to the sound, but the fact that there's it also involves very little to no separation in between the notes. There's that's a big part of it. So every
note is as long as it could be.
There's an evenness, right? Yeah, to it. And one thing I still like to do is just take like any given sound. We could pick a mode, a scale, whatever you want to think about, and just like play simply, just eighth notes even, and just create a flow. So let's say we were just playing C major, really focusing on the connections between notes and the not worrying about playing fast necessarily at first, just creating. So my fingers are really close to the fretboard, but it's a sound and a touch that I'm going for.
You're still picking quite a bit.
I'm picking quite a bit, but I'm focusing on
getting as long as you can, basically.
Long, even sounds. Now you can work on it without your right hand as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
so when you're crossing with your index, you're still basically making the note.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, it depends. You know, some of it has become like instinctual to the point where I'm like, okay, I'd have to think about it for a second and analyze my own playing to be able to explain it. Mm-hmm. Because I think I'll practice one thing and then after a while it just kind of becomes second nature, and then I don't even realize what I'm doing anymore in terms of like when I pick. I remember watching some Holdsworth clinic, and someone asked them about that, like, when do you pick, when do you not, like, when do you bring in the sweeping motions, et cetera, and Alan goes, I don't know. And I think I know to a degree, like I can try and explain it, but it's just funny to see Alan like just admit, I don't know, it's just instinctual, it's a sound I'm going for, you know.
Right.
So anyway, this is like the eighth note thing, even just trying to make that sound good is a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's sort of, now when you practice, do you typically practice with a clean sound?
Both. But you know, you want to be able to, you know, I remember growing up, people having this thing about, all right, you only can practice clean. You can only practice with a clean sound. And like, while there's a lot of validity to that in terms of like, you don't want to hide behind any effects. You also need to practice with distortion because you need to be able to control that.
Sure.
That's a big part of it as well. You know, there seems to be like this macho thing of like, you can't practice with distortion at all. You have to play clean. Yes, you do. You have to be able to make something sound good, like with the bare minimum. But if you get on stage not having become acquainted with a distortion sound and the thing's feeding back like hell, and then you have to find your sound, good luck.
Right.
So I think there's both sides of the argument. Yeah.
So let me ask you this: how, with a distorted tone, what does your muting technique look like?
Okay.
Like what's the adjustment you're making with your right hand? Because it seems to me like, you know, I mean,
I'll put this down a little bit. I'll just kind of noodle. This is usually resting. Controlling the, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's like sort of palm mute.
Uh-huh.
And then like how, but you know, the notes you're actually letting ring, you know, you're somehow making space for them to not be muted at all.
Mm-hmm. I'd say like it's kind of like the I'm not pressing super hard down with the flesh of my palm here. It's kind of like hovering a little bit.
But you are making contact with, I would say, like the E and the A string, right?
Yes, and then when it comes time to play down there, my wrist kind of adjusts accordingly.
The control you have personally, like there's not a lot of players like you. I don't know if you know this or not, but it's you know, like playing kind of getting a thicker sound above, up to, almost like above the fretboard, and then like, you know, adjusting, moving by the bridge. That's, you know, I don't know if it's something you consciously worked on a lot, but it's really like it makes some lines really pop.
Oh, you know? Thank you, man. I don't know. I think a lot of it is just going for a sound, and like whether it be through transcribing other players and going, I want that feel, I want that sound, I want to incorporate that, and then just reconciling that with, you know, the tools we have available.
Sure.
I think a lot of it is instinctual. Like I don't usually think about like where my palm goes anymore.
Right.
And then I will say I become aware of it when I don't like the sound, when I'm like, let's say there's some passage in a solo or, you know, a given piece of music, and I'm like, oh man, that feels like I'm overexerting myself, or I don't like this. That then I become aware of it when I don't like it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, all right. So with this, let's dig in now a little bit into that legato sort of exercise, like with the eighth note flow. So I was noticing a lot of these kind of almost false fingering-y things you were doing. Like I don't know exactly like the kinds of sounds happening. But yeah, can you show me some of what you were doing?
Well, the false fingering things, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I think saxophone playing, like being inspired by horn players, is very relevant to this discussion.
Yeah.
Obviously, going back to Holdsworth, he wanted to sound like a, Coltrane, or, took inspiration from that sound and tried to translate it to the guitar. So the false fingering thing, I think there's definitely a tie in there. I talk about this a lot too, like when I have a student or anyone who's curious about, like, the kind of positions I favor, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I like to look at the guitar vertically, diagonally, as we do most of the time, but also rather vertically and horizontally and diagonally as well.
Yeah.
So like, even if you took something as simple as an A minor pentatonic, you can reframe that into more of this, as you say, false fingering diagonal approach. So I think
I love that. Yeah.
Finding these different approaches, it's very conducive to a certain type of time feel and a flow that you wouldn't get if you were just playing the
right. When you're crossing. I'm getting a little tongue-tied, but like, what
sounds good?
What are kind of like the motions? So when you have these kind of things that typically, I guess, a person that plays in position is tempted to bar, you would use. Like in the motion and this diagonal, what tend to be the fingerings that bring you a position that way? I know it's hard to think about.
Yeah, I think I'd say, like, I'm thinking of how would I naturally assign each finger to a fret? Like, what feels comfortable in terms of my spacing? So I'm thinking, this. I'm not necessarily thinking about like one crossing over the other off, even though that does happen. But let's say you play here.
So even like when you do that, like to me, that spacing, I wouldn't think to start there, but it kind of lets you keep going.
A good test is to start anywhere. Say like, all right, let's start on our high E here. I'm thinking again about how would I naturally space my fingers? Like, it's almost like thinking like a piano player, if you want to put it that way, to where I can make these adjustments, these stretchy adjustments in the moment. So like, here's one, for example.
Okay, I see.
And then sometimes, you work on doubling up the false fingerings, as you say.
So what I'm seeing, just looking at your playing right now, is this sort of dance with the index finger where it's kind of like in position and then it kind of covers two positions and then you're using that to shift.
Right. this is like it's almost like it's a little bit, you could think of it like not forming a chord, but it's like when you go to form a chord and you're moving from one to the other, several of the fingers, or at least one of them, is always preparing right for the next motion. So it's kind of like that, and so that creates more of the seamless motion or sound.
I feel like that's a lot. Like, doesn't it feel, Nick, like there's something? I don't know if I can articulate it or grasp it yet, but like there's like I don't know, like that's a major difference between like Alex and like other players, like that kind of motion. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's something I've developed over time to, like I said, get a sound and a time feel. So a time feel that I'm going for.
When you let's talk about this time feel you're going for. Like, how would you, if you had to put into words something that obviously can't be put into words, what kind of thing is that? Like, you know, you've said it like a bunch of times now. What are you going for?
I mean, I could bring up like audio examples, like reference points, other than like, because I could bash on my own playing all day, what I don't like, but in terms of what I do like and sounds that I, players I do like, I can bring that up. And also I will say, I think there's a lot of things involved, but usually we think about time feel, or a lot of people think about time feel as just like, okay, you have good time, you have good metronomic time, you can stay with a beat, you can, you're good at not rushing or dragging. But time feel is a different thing.
Right.
And I know you know that, but I think as guitar players, we need to discuss, more people need to discuss that.
Well, it's a difference between people moving together and somebody gracefully dancing, right? It's like a whole other ballpark.
It's almost like you could think about relativity. I don't know, it kind of seems like a weird analogy, but it's like, think about time in one way, and to me, where time is like a thing that goes by, like you could think about it as your metronomic time, your stable time, and the players that I enjoy the most, that connect with me the most, for the most part, are the ones that can manipulate that. Like, they can push it, they can make it drag in a way that has a particular good feeling quality. Now that sounds basic, but going back to what I was saying a second ago, articulation comes into play. If for instance, the line has an articulation kind of sound that I don't like, articulation juts out awkwardly, that affects the time feel. If the pick is articulating in awkward places, it's like it almost takes you out of the line, right, of the flow of the line, so to speak. So I say, trying to summarize this a little bit, and I think I said this earlier, I'm looking for an evenness oftentimes to the sound, and if the pick is involved, great, but I'm looking for that seamless kind of evenness to the articulation and to the flow. And now time feel comes from that, but it's an interesting discussion because we don't usually talk about time feel and articulation, or time feel and dynamic as part of the same thing. Right? But so that evenness doesn't just have to do with the articulation of my right hand, it has to do with the evenness each of my fingers has, the role each of my fingers has in creating that evenness. Like, can you control the dynamics with each of these fingers and not have one jut out more than the other?
Me personally, no. So it's great to see.
and then beyond that, controlling, like I said, from moment to moment, it's easier to do it in a context where there's a track being played, or you're playing with a band. Varying the dynamics just this ever so slightly here and there to make that time feel possible. And I can bring up a bunch of examples, but if you listen to some of our favorite players, the guys, the gals that have the great time feel, they can control the dynamics ever so slightly, moment by moment, millisecond by millisecond, to create that flow. So it's kind of a long-winded explanation.
No, but it's great. I mean, I also like the way, like the direction this is taking, because you're saying to build technique, first of all, you gotta start from this ability to play everything even with your left hand. And then, because of the way you're explaining this, where articulation is sort of something that could send you spiraling out of that flow, you sort of introduce it as a way of staying in to decorate it. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So okay. Do you have like the ability to play tracks on your end?
Sure.
Can we hear you just improvise over just like something real simple, real quick, and have me like point out like I want that?
Okay, sure. Can you hear my guitar okay, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me I've got this other computer here with some speakers, because I think if I have anything coming out of the laptop speakers, it's going to sound like a lovely mess.
Yeah, probably.
Let's see. Let's pull up just like a vamp or something. Simple vamp. Okay.
I'm so inspired to practice some now. Seriously.
And it's interesting. Like, I mean, I'm pulling up some tracks here. The thinking about how I've changed or like honed in on the approach over time, it's something I've thought about for a long time, but I haven't always played this way. I've had a predilection towards it, or I guess you could say, but I haven't this hasn't been a fully formed concept since I was 9 or something like that. Yeah. I've worked on it for a while. But let me see. Let's pull up a track here on Logic. 1 second.
Sure. We can also, if things get Nick can edit this out.
Okay, great.
That's so don't be
sorry for the dead air. I have like a Chick Corea groove here, which is like a vamp.
Perfect.
One of the guys that I really love, he doesn't get talked about enough, is Charles Altura. Have you checked him out?
He plays with Virgil Donati, right?
He did years ago. He was in Chick's band for a while in the Vigil. Right. He's really got that Holdsworthian saxophone language on guitar, but is just a master technician in many respects. He's awesome.
We'll check him out.
Yeah, Charles is the business. Let's see here. Can you hear this? This is actually a groove from a Chick Corea album that Charles was on. It was on the Vigil record, and I just liked it a lot. And it's just like a C minor, modal vamp.
Sure, perfect. That's all we need.
Okay, cool. Let's see what we can do here. I haven't really played it all today, but I have other guitars here too if you need a different sound, but I'll just stick with this for now. Alrighty. Is the balance okay?
The track down just a little bit.
Turn the track down? Yeah. Track down more. I'll turn up. Is that better?
So like especially like the faster lines, that sounded like some quintuplet kind of things, like oh, but like it almost seems like when you have that even smooth kind of thing, it just becomes more of like a flowing line. I'm assuming you're not really thinking metronomically what that means against.
Usually I'm not thinking about like, okay, now I'm gonna do a quintuplet or something like that. Usually it just kind of happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The one thing that keeps getting me is like the thumb position, like when you're playing, is so like you get like to these areas where I never see like.
So it kind of like it's like this like fulcrum thing here that happens. Like if I'm playing higher up on the neck and I need to make this like big stretch happen, for instance, my thumb is kind of reacting or moving to adjust. I don't know if that helps.
Like, for most players, it's sort like the fulcrum is sort of the opposite. When you go to the bass side of your guitar to keep your straight, your thumb compensates by going here. And when you play the treble side, it's kind of like almost this Scott Henderson-y sideways type of grab where you go.
Yeah. That's an interesting thing.
It seems like in your playing, when you go high up, you're creating sort of this, I don't know if you can see it, like this kind of space.
Yeah.
And when you go down.
I think the higher up I get on the fretboard, I don't really have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But like it's what feels natural. Like if I were to be high up on the fretboard, that wouldn't feel natural for my thumb to be way down here. So it really depends. Anyway.
Yeah. When you're, it's really, the thing that's really getting me about it is how much of the sound is just seems to be produced by the left hand independently, and then you kind of are adding the right hand back in.
Right.
I think like for me as a player, and I think that has to do with like playing acoustic primarily for a long time. It's more like the right hand tends to be like kind of the sound production mechanism, and everything. You know what I mean? It's like this is sort of the thing making the dance,
right?
And the left hand needs to be in sync, and occasionally will decorate a stroke. Pull off or a hammer on, like in the context of like Jimmy Rosenberg or Django Reinhardt or somebody like that. It's that's sort of playing lead, and all the flow happens from here. And like coming, it's sort of like an opposite world. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not to say that the pick can't act as the impetus for a line, but I would say it's more like, do I have to rely on this to make a good sound? It's part of the equation, depending on what sound I'm going for. But could anyone take as a test, like, I don't want to say a test, like just a means of like exercising the left hand and the sound that you can generate from it. Take a track like this and just see what you can do with the right hand taken out of the equation. Like, for a while, but
that's very eye-opening. That's Nick, is that
the left hand?
Yeah. Okay. That seems to be like the missing component in a lot of our How to Holdsworth journey.
Yeah, Holdsworth, man, I mean, I don't know. I never had a chance to ask him about it, and I know he kind of kept a lot of his knowledge close to the vest.
Oh yeah.
But I'd be curious about, what did he do, like when it came to working on these kinds of things? And the answer would probably be something along the lines of what he's already answers he's already given in clinics and stuff. Like, it's a sound I'm going for,
Yeah.
rather than an exercise thing,
Yeah, 100%. No, but I mean, I all of a sudden, for me, just talking to you for the last whatever 40 minutes, it's like that's one thing that I guess I never really thought about in terms of like actual independence of the left hand and generating the sound there. Now, in the little bit of time we have left, I want to obviously, like, you're fairly deep into the Holdsworth thing yourself. I'm not sure to like what extent, but to some extent. If people want to check out, like, you did like Non-Brewed Condiment, like played with Virgil's band, did like a tribute for him, and obviously
Yeah.
influence on your style. The whole 9-note scale thing.
Yeah.
How deep are you in that? How much of that? Because that seems like it's not as big of part of your language seems in a way more traditional with kind of moments of that rather than like to me, to my ear at least, you're much, you're more inside the jazz tradition, I'd say, that like, than a guy like Alan was.
Yeah, I would say that's right. It's the whole 9-note scale thing. It's something I want to do or want to investigate more. And obviously, guys like Brett have really done a deep dive into that world and opened up a whole lot of possibilities. And it's an interesting discussion because, well, for a number of reasons. One, it sounds really awesome. Also, it's almost like it's so ear expanding to recognize these patterns or to begin to like codify them to the extent that or to the point that like stuff that might have sounded like alien and it still does before and like non-classifiable is in some way. But when you get into like all these permutations of stuff beyond 7 and 8 note scales, for me, it's like, I wonder, okay, how much could we classify this stuff just in terms of, here's this scale with some chromatic stuff in it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, where do we draw the line there? And knowledge for knowledge's sake is great. And I want to, continue on that journey and figure out what that world is all about. But I don't really have a lot of experience, like, investigating that stuff.
Okay.
The Messiaen modes and whatnot, like in terms of the more traditional, modes and chord scales and how that relates to, the more traditional kind of jazz bebop language, we could talk about that for days. I could go on for days about that. I am, like you said, more rooted in that world, and then kind of step into the world that is not so much defined by typical tonal language, I guess you could
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, because I'm not one of those guys, even though Alan has had a huge influence on me, I'm not one of those guys that's like picked apart every solo he's done. I've just taken little bits of inspiration here and there and tried to reframe it in my own way.
Yeah.
Whether it be like a type of technique or like an approach to, superimposition over, chords or stuff like that. And also, I think not always being so like being able to move from the more theoretical approach and coming up with these outside, if you will, more inventive harmonic kind of avenues of playing over chord changes, superimposing over chord changes, having that approach, but also like being able to just be curious, like about the geometry of lines, and use that as a means of inspiration, because your ear is going to be the judge at the end of the day. If you like the sound of it, and your fingers, you're curious about, the kinesthetic aspect of it, like who's to say you can't do something? Sure. I remember Holdsworth actually had some quote, some of the effect of, I'm going to paraphrase it, try and imagine shapes on the fretboard, like almost as if the different frets are lighting up, and see if your fingers can do it. Right. So I think Holdsworth in that way really opened everyone's minds up to what could be possible on the guitar, that wasn't, structured so much by the traditional ways we've come to conceive it. And the geometry of stuff really fascinates me a lot too. So sometimes, I might be just curious about a shape, and then I'll think about how does the theory apply later,
I completely hear you on that one. So last thing I'm going to ask of you, can you you have a ton of super cool chromatic kind of repetitive patterns that you sort of do in different areas. Can you just show us one?
Chromatic.
Yeah, like I can go on your Instagram and fish one out, but I'm sure you could just make one up.
Yeah, I'll try and make one up. It's funny, like I'll have people ask me like, "Hey man, what did you play here?" Like, fuck, I have no idea what that was at all. Sorry, it's a kid show.
No, it's you can curse, you can.
I don't know what 9-year-old kid's gonna be watching. But if you're
no, this is all about hate. We like to promote hate of all kinds.
All right, let me think about this for a second.
Yeah. Well, no, you think.
I would say like a lot of times it's, if I'm coming up with like a chromatic passage, there's a goal in mind. It's teleological.
Right.
It's so if we're in C minor, thinking about places where I can land. So let's say we start with like a more minuscule example, like here's my landing point. The more typical or less typical bebop kind of approach, where you have a target note and you're enveloping it with neighbor tones, right? I mean, you can extend that to other strings, to other target notes. So again, I'm thinking of these target notes, and like, you could almost visualize it like, all right, there's like the diamond shape here that's going on. I see these areas where I can potentially land, and it's about where my ear wants to go. Do I want to land on a G? Do I want to land on an A and create some different color? It's like, what tension do you want to create? And then also challenging yourself to say, okay, I want to like play in C minor and pick like the most disparate like mode I can think of and resolve it. Like, because the whole playing outside thing, oftentimes when I feel it doesn't work, if I play my own lines and I'm going for something and I feel like it's off, it's because I'm not resolving it with conviction. It sounds like random notes. If there's conviction in the lines, there's a direction in the lines, you can kind of make anything work.
Okay.
Like, let's say you had C. Let's pick another mode. So we got C minor, C Dorian. Let's name another sound.
Just any sound?
Any sound.
All right. Does it have to be in C or?
No.
Okay. Let's do, I don't know, D Phrygian.
D Phrygian. Okay.
It's not Phrygian, I meant. D flat frigid.
D flat frigid. Okay, so I'm doing Phrygian dominant. Sorry. So let's plot it out. So let's say. So these are pretty disparate sounds. Let's say we wanted to resolve one to the other. So I'm like investigating different ways I can connect the two.
Sort of like a sidestepping thing, just
right? Yeah, you could think of it like sidestepping. How are you resolving the lines? One way to do it is like take a track. So right there, there's a lot of chromatic language going on. But I've got this D flat Phrygian thing in mind here. I know there's like a lot could be said about all this. I'm trying to like give like a little crash course on how I think about.
No, that's great. That's great. I mean, and I think it also really relates to that, you know, the discussion about time and how you're, you know, using kind of a flowy time feel to, you know, you put it in a certain place where it works in the music, and then the resolution happens, right? It's like sort of a bar of that thing resolving to a bar of that thing with smooth voice leading.
And also like thinking about going back to the whole geometric way of looking at things, looking at taking structures, like entire structures, rather than always thinking about it in a scalar fashion like this, taking like say, all right, here's a Phrygian structure. What can I do with that as inspiration for a melodic line? Now I'm kind of moving a little outside of the D flat Phrygian thing, but that was like the impetus, the inspiration. See here, I'm figuring out how does this apply to C Dorian now. Pretty out sound, but you can make it work. It's about how you use it, really.
Yeah. No, I'm into it. I'm into it. Okay. We're going to do this again. Me and Nick here are gonna practice, right, Nick?
Oh yeah.
We're gonna be two Alex clones by the next time we talk.
Oh man, you guys are too kind. Thanks for your interest.
Oh no, dude, we're gonna do more of this. People need to know this whole. I mean, for me, I think there's a lot. Honestly, like, you know, in my music, I feel like since I've always been the person writing the tunes, like with the saxophone player with Dani, and, you know, deciding what I'm playing on. Everything sort of followed the way I played guitar for a very long time. Like everything was designed to go with the way I already approached the instrument, and it's time to break out of that. We're gonna learn some new shit.
Yeah, man. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, this technical approach mixed with the deep dive to the whole tour thing will be unfucking stoppable, right, Nick?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing the final edit. Are you kind of random question? Are you gonna be on the cruise next year?
Yeah. You coming?
Okay, I think we're on it.
Sick.
So
yeah, dude. So you're doing Cruise to the Edge?
Yeah.
Sick. So we'll see you there. That's awesome.
It'll be a good
time. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. Oh yeah, anything you want to plug, we'll put links to. I know you have a website.
Yeah, it's just alexsill.com. I'm like trying to think of other stuff to plug at the moment. I mean, I'm going to be working on a new album soon, but that's in terms of release that I have no idea when that's going to happen.
The second protocol?
My own solo record.
Cool.
And then this where are you? You're in the Midwest. Are you in
We're in
Chicago?
Chicago, yeah.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you like crime? We have lots of it. Oh, you're in LA. You guys are way. Never mind.
We got some of that here too, but
oh, okay.
I don't know if it's as gnarly. But
we're more into shootings. You guys are more into fentanyl, so we can trade.
Oh man, there's another deep dive podcast in itself.
Yeah.
Well,
cool.
Thanks for having me. You know, anytime.
Real pleasure. Yeah, we definitely want to do that again. We need to get a little better to ask more intelligible questions than like, show me a technical thing.
It's hard to discuss this stuff. Like
no. This is the beginning. We're gonna, you know, the more you work on it, the better questions you have. So we're gonna do some fucking work.
Right on, man.
Alrighty, man. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thanks, brother. I'll see you guys.
See you soon.
Peace.